Commander Ada Blackwood stood at the observation deck of the Earth Embassy, watching the crystalline spires of New Geneva stretch toward the artificial stars above. The seat of the Galactic Assembly glittered like a jeweled crown, its perfect geometry masking the rot within. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Lyric Tull's imprisonment, and the Assembly's bureaucrats still pretended nothing was amiss. Lyric Tull, the most brilliant diplomatic mind of the Stellaris Alliance, had committed the unforgivable crime of suggesting reforms to the Assembly's corrupt trade policies. Her proposal would have opened up restricted trade routes to emerging civilizations, breaking the monopoly held by the Assembly's inner circle. Within days of her presentation, evidence of conspiracy against galactic peace materialized, and Lyra found herself in a quantum-locked cell on Fortress Station Zero. The door chimed, and Admiral James Harrison entered, his weathered face grave. "The latest petition was rejected," he said, handing Ada a quantum tablet. "Unanimous vote, as usual." "Of course it was," Ada replied, scanning the document. "The Assembly Council doesn't even bother to make their corruption subtle anymore." "Did you see the trading patterns I flagged?" Harrison nodded, his cybernetic eye glowing faintly. Every council member transferred significant assets just before the vote. "They're not even trying to hide it." "They don't think they need to," Ada said, turning back to the window. "Humanity's been in the galactic community for barely 30 years. To them, we're still primitive newcomers who shouldn't question their ancient wisdom." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The Assembly had welcomed Earth into their ranks with grand ceremonies and flowery speeches about unity and progress. What they really wanted was access to humanity's unique innovations in quantum engineering. Earth's breakthrough in stable wormhole creation had caught their attention, but they never expected humans to take such an interest in galactic politics. Ada pulled up a holographic display of Fortress Station Zero. The prison facility orbited a quantum anomaly, using its gravitational distortions to power the containment fields. The Assembly thinks they've created the perfect prison, but they've forgotten something crucial about humans. "And what's that, Commander?" "We have a rather spectacular history of breaking perfect systems." Ada's fingers danced across the holographic controls, highlighting specific sections of the station. "Have our agents made contact with the Rathi Trading Consortium?" "Better than that." Harrison smiled for the first time that day. "The Rathi aren't just interested. They're angry. The Assembly's trade restrictions have been hitting their margins hard. They're ready to help, provided we can guarantee them access to our new quantum corridor technology." Ada allowed herself a small smile. The Rathi, with their vast network of seemingly legitimate trading operations, were exactly what they needed. "And the Nexus Collective? They're considering our proposal. Their quantum architects are particularly interested in the theoretical papers we sent them, the ones about potential flaws in the Assembly's containment field designs." The pieces were falling into place. The Assembly had built their power on a foundation of restricted technology and controlled trade routes. They never imagined that humanity, the newcomers they looked down upon, would find ways to circumvent their carefully constructed systems. "Initiate Phase 1, Ada commanded, her voice steady. "Authorization Blackwood 7 Delta 9. Harrison's cybernetic eye flickered as he processed the command. "Phase 1 confirmed. Our shell companies will begin purchasing minor shipping contracts tomorrow. The Assembly's economic analysts won't flag it. We'll stay well below their attention threshold." Ada turned back to the glittering spires of New Geneva. The Assembly thought they were untouchable, protected by millennia of accumulated power and their advanced technology. They were about to learn a painful lesson about humanity's capacity for creative problem-solving. "You know," Harrison said quietly, "some would say we're risking too much for one ambassador." This stopped being about one ambassador the moment they decided to imprison an innocent person to protect their corrupt system, Ada replied. "The Assembly needs to learn that humanity won't stand by while they trample on justice. Besides," she added with a grim smile, "they're the ones who taught us about galactic politics. They shouldn't be surprised when we play the game better than they do. As night fell over New Geneva, lights began to twinkle in the crystal towers like stars caught in ice. Somewhere in the darkness of space, Lyra Kittle sat in her quantum-locked cell, probably wondering if anyone would dare to challenge the Assembly's verdict. She would learn soon enough that humanity had its own ideas about justice, and they were about to demonstrate them in spectacular fashion. "Send word to our contacts in the Rathi Consortium," Ada ordered. "Tell them to prepare for significant market disruption. Things are about to get very interesting in the Galactic community." As Harrison left to relay the commands, Ada remained at the window, watching the city below. The Assembly had built their power structure over thousands of years, creating a system they believed was impregnable. But they had never faced humanity's particular talent for finding weaknesses in seemingly perfect systems. The game was about to begin, and Ada intended to show the Assembly exactly why underestimating humanity was their biggest mistake. Webs of deception. The quantum drives hummed softly as the diplomatic shuttle approached Fortress Station Zero. Through the viewport, Admiral Harrison watched the massive structure emerge from the quantum anomaly's swirling clouds. Behind him, Commander Ada Blackwood reviewed the credentials that had cost Earth's intelligence service 3 months of careful manipulation to obtain. "Humanitarian inspection," she muttered, smoothing her formal diplomatic uniform. The oldest trick in the book, and they still fell for it. The station's docking authorities transmitted their clearance, unaware that the seemingly routine inspection would trigger the next phase of Operation Starcross. As they docked, Ada noticed the subtle shimmer of quantum dampening fields, the Assembly's pride and joy in containment technology. The welcoming committee consisted of Director Voss and Reth, a towering archon whose crystalline exoskeleton sparkled under the station's harsh lighting. "Commander Blackwood," he rumbled through his translator, "we are honored by Earth's interest in our facility." Ada matched his insincere smile. "The honor is ours, Director. Earth takes its responsibilities as a member of the galactic community very seriously." The tour was exactly what Ada expected, a carefully choreographed display of the Assembly's humane containment protocols. They showed her everything except what she actually wanted to see. But that didn't matter. The real operation was already underway. Hidden within the quantum signature of their shuttle's engines, specialized scanning devices were mapping the station's security grid. Each step Ada took through the facility triggered microscopic quantum sensors embedded in her boots, building a detailed blueprint of the station's power distribution network. "Our containment systems exceed all Assembly regulations," Director Enreth boasted, leading them past rows of cells. "The quantum dampening fields are specifically calibrated for each prisoner's unique energy signature." "Impressive," Ada remarked, noting how the director avoided mentioning the cell at the heart of the facility, the one holding Ambassador Lyra Kittle. "I understand you've made recent upgrades to the power distribution system." The question was casual, but she caught the slight stiffening of Enreth's crystalline form. "Standard maintenance procedures," he replied smoothly. "Nothing worth noting in your report." What he didn't know was that the maintenance procedures had been suggested by a consulting firm that was actually a front for Earth's intelligence operations. The upgrades included seemingly minor modifications that would prove crucial in the days to come. Back on their shuttle, Harrison activated quantum shielding before speaking. "Scans complete. The security architecture is exactly where our insider info said it would be." Ada reviewed the data streaming across her neural interface, and the powered fluctuations. Right on schedule. The Rathi's market manipulations are forcing the Assembly to divert more energy to maintain their trade route controls. They're drawing power from secondary systems, including prison security. It had taken months of careful planning to reach this point. The Assembly's power structure relied on control of trade routes, technology, and information. But they had never faced an opponent who could attack on all fronts simultaneously. While Ada's inspection kept the station's authorities occupied, Earth's covert operations were bearing fruit across the galaxy. The Rathi Trading Consortium's aggressive expansion was forcing assembly-backed corporations to expend massive resources maintaining their monopolies. The Nexus Collective's quantum architects were discovering flaws in assembly containment protocols, requiring expensive emergency patches. Each crisis seemed unrelated, but together they formed a web that was slowly constricting around the assembly's power structure. And at the center of it all was the truth about Ambassador Lyra Tull's imprisonment, a truth that would shatter the assembly's credibility once revealed. Phase 2 is ready, Harrison reported as their shuttle cleared the station's security perimeter. Our agents have confirmed that Counselor Drenix accepted the bribe. Ada's smile held no warmth. Counselor Drenix, the assembly member who had presided over Lyra's trial, had a weakness for rare quantum crystals. The temptation of acquiring illegal specimens had proven too strong to resist. "Send the evidence to our contacts in the independent media networks," she ordered. "Time to let the galaxy see how justice works in the assembly." The real genius of Earth's plan wasn't in its complexity, but in its simplicity. They weren't trying to break the assembly's power directly. They were simply creating situations where corruption would naturally reveal itself. The assembly built their system on the assumption that everyone would play by their rules. Ada mused, watching the station recede into the quantum storm. They never considered what would happen when someone used those same rules against them. As their shuttle entered quantum space, alerts began flooding the diplomatic channels. Counselor Drenix had been caught in a compromising transaction. The evidence suggested connections to other assembly officials. Questions were being raised about previous judicial decisions, including the case of a certain Stellaris ambassador. The wet was tightening, and the assembly was about to learn that their biggest mistake wasn't imprisoning Lyra Tull. It was assuming they could do so without consequences. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting against unjust systems, and they were about to demonstrate that expertise on a galactic scale. Operation Starfall. The Assembly's emergency session erupted into chaos as trading reports flooded the quantum displays. Markets across 3 sectors had collapsed overnight. Assembly-backed corporations were hemorrhaging credits as their monopolies crumbled under the weight of unexpected competition. Admiral Harrison's hologram flickered in Ada's office as he delivered the update. The Rathi Consortium just unleashed their new shipping fleet. They're offering rates 60% below standard assembly tariffs. "And the Quantum Corridor Network?" Ada asked, monitoring the cascade of financial alerts. "Fully operational. The Nexus Collective's quantum architects outdid themselves. These new trade routes completely bypass assembly control points. The plan was working better than they'd anticipated. The assembly had spent centuries building their power on controlled trade routes and restricted technology. Now those foundations were crumbling." In her quantum-locked cell, Ambassador Lyra Tull felt the subtle shift in the containment fields. The station's power grid was struggling to maintain multiple systems simultaneously, just as planned. The evidence against Counselor Drenix had triggered investigations that exposed deeper corruption. 3 more council members had been implicated in illegal trading schemes. The Assembly's carefully maintained image of infallibility was shattering. "They're calling an emergency vote," Harrison reported, "trying to implement emergency trade restrictions." Ada smiled. "Let them. Every restriction they impose only drives more traders to our alternative routes." The real genius of Earth's strategy wasn't in direct confrontation, but in offering better alternatives. The Assembly's power relied on being the only option. Humanity had simply created new options. Independent worlds, long squeezed by Assembly trade policies, were defecting to Earth's new economic network. The Rathi Consortium's ships, equipped with human quantum drive technology, operated with unprecedented efficiency. "Station security report incoming," Harrison announced. "Fortress Zero is diverting power from containment systems to maintain their quantum communication arrays. They can't handle the surge in emergency transmissions." Ada activated her neural interface, reviewing the power distribution data. The prison's systems were operating at critical levels. "Send the signal to our operative inside. It's time." Deep within Fortress Zero, a maintenance drone executed its updated programming. A microscopic quantum fluctuation, precisely calibrated, rippled through the power grid. In her cell, Lyra Kittle felt the containment field flicker. The assembly had built their prison using the most advanced technology in the galaxy. But they'd forgotten something crucial about quantum systems. They're only as stable as their power supply. Multiple systems failing at Fortress Zero, Harrison reported, his cybernetic eye pulsing with incoming data. They're attempting to reroute emergency power. But there was no emergency power to reroute. Every backup system was already strained handling the economic crisis. The assembly had never imagined they'd need to deal with multiple catastrophic failures simultaneously. Containment breach detected in high security wing. The station's automated alerts blared. Emergency protocols initiated. Ambassador Lyra Kittle stepped through her deactivated containment field just as Earth's maintenance team arrived at her cell block. Their timing was precise, the result of months of careful planning. The assembly's calling for immediate military response, Harrison warned. Let them, Ada replied, watching the chaos unfold. By the time their ships arrive, the truth about Lyra's case will be public knowledge. We've already transmitted the evidence to every independent media network in the galaxy. The data package contained irrefutable proof of the assembly's corruption. Fabricated evidence, doctored testimonies, and financial records showing exactly why they'd wanted to silence Lyra's proposed reforms. Their own security cameras recorded them planning the whole thing, Ada noted with satisfaction. Apparently, it never occurred to them that human-designed surveillance systems might have backdoors. The assembly had spent generations believing their power was absolute. They'd forgotten that power built on corruption has inherent weaknesses. Humanity hadn't needed to destroy their system. They'd simply created the conditions for it to collapse under its own weight. As reports of Lyra's escape spread across the galaxy, the Assembly's emergency session descended into accusations and recriminations. Their unity, maintained by shared corruption, was dissolving in the face of exposure. Phase 3 complete, Harrison confirmed. The Assembly's voting on emergency measures, but they're divided. Some members are already calling for total reform of the system. Ada looked out at the glittering spires of New Geneva, knowing that behind those perfect crystalline facades, the old order was crumbling. Send word to our allies. It's time to present our proposal for a new galactic charter, one based on actual justice, not power and control. The Assembly had imprisoned Lyra Kittle thinking they were silencing a threat. Instead, they'd triggered their own downfall. They were about to learn that in their effort to maintain control, they'd created something far more dangerous. A unified opposition led by humanity's particular talent for dismantling corrupt systems. Breaking point. The Assembly's emergency fleet dropped out of quantum space above Fortress Station Zero, their weapons primed. But they were too late. Ambassador Lyra Kittle was already aboard an Earth diplomatic vessel, protected by international law, and a web of political consequences too complex for even the Assembly to untangle. They're demanding her immediate return, Admiral Harrison reported from the bridge of the EDS Prometheus, threatening military action. Commander Ada Blackwood stood at the ship's quantum communications array, broadcasting their message to every corner of the galaxy. Let them threaten. The evidence is already public. Every independent world in the galaxy is watching. The evidence package had hit the quantum networks like a supernova. Security footage, financial records, encrypted communications, all showing how the Assembly had fabricated charges against Lyra to protect their economic stranglehold on the galaxy. Multiple Assembly vessels moving to intercept, the tactical officer announced. They're charging weapons. Hold position, Ada ordered. Activate quantum shields, but do not power weapons. Let's see if they're really willing to start a war over this. The Assembly ships formed a blockade, their massive forms casting shadows across the stars. But they didn't fire. They couldn't. Earth's quantum broadcast had changed the game entirely. New transmissions incoming, Harrison reported. The Rathi Consortium is mobilizing their merchant fleet. The Nexus Collective is threatening to suspend all quantum architecture services. 3 minor assembly members have already called for leadership resignations. The assembly had maintained power through isolation and control. But humanity had given their victims something more powerful than weapons: alternatives. Every minor species that had suffered under assembly restrictions now had a choice. "They're requesting negotiations," Harrison announced, his cybernetic eye pulsing with incoming data. "The assembly leadership wants to discuss terms." "Of course they do," Ada replied. "Their entire system is collapsing. The only question is whether they'll accept reform or try something desperate." They got their answer 3 hours later. A faction of hardline assembly members, led by Director Enreth, attempted to seize control of the council chambers. They launched a quantum virus designed to cripple Earth's new trade network. But humanity had planned for this too. The virus hit quantum firewalls specifically designed to catch and redirect it. Instead of destroying Earth's network, it exposed the hidden communications channels the corrupt assembly members had used for years. "Incoming transmission from the moderate assembly factions," Harrison reported. "They're formally requesting Earth's assistance in establishing a transition government." The old guard had overplayed their hand. Their desperate grab for power had only served to demonstrate exactly why they needed to be removed. The moderate factions, long silenced by political pressure, finally had the support they needed to act. Ambassador Lyra Tull, standing on the Prometheus's bridge, watched the assembly fleet's formations break apart as new orders reached their commanders. "They never understood," she said softly. "Power maintained through fear and control will always breed its own destruction." "Humanity learned that lesson centuries ago," Ada replied. "We just needed to help the galaxy learn it too." The next 12 hours saw more changes in galactic politics than the previous 1,000 years. The hardline faction's attempted coup became the catalyst for complete reform. Minor species, emboldened by Earth's success, began demanding representation. The corrupt economic system that had enriched assembly members for generations crumbled as traders embraced the new open routes. "The remaining hardliners are retreating to fortified positions," Harrison reported. "They're threatening to destroy the quantum lane network rather than lose control." "Let them try," Ada smiled. "Our quantum architects have already established a backup network. The more they'd fight, the more they'd prove why they need to be removed from power." The assembly had built their authority on the assumption that their advanced technology made them invincible. They never considered that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was the ability to unite others against injustice. As the old power structure collapsed, Ada received a message from Earth Command. The Council of Nations had voted unanimously to support the Galactic Reformation. Humanity's first major intervention in galactic politics had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. "Send word to our allies," Ada ordered. "Tell them it's time to implement the final phase. The galaxy is ready for a new system, one built on cooperation instead of control." The Assembly's desperate gambit had failed. In trying to maintain their power through force, they had only succeeded in demonstrating why that power needed to end. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had proven itself to be not just a participant, but a catalyst for that change. Dawn of change. The new Geneva Council chamber looked different without the ostentatious displays of assembly power. The crystalline towers still reached toward the stars, but now they house representatives from every spacefaring species, not just the privileged few. Commander Ada Blackwood stood before the newly formed Galactic Coalition, presenting the final report on the transition. "The last assembly holdout surrendered at Nexus Prime," she announced. "The quantum lane network is fully operational under shared control protocols." Ambassador Lyra Tull, now serving as the coalition's first Chief Justice, nodded in approval. The former prisoner had become a symbol of the new order, proof that justice could prevail over corruption. "The economic reports from the outer systems are exceeding projections," Admiral Harrison added. "Free trade through the new quantum corridors has increased commerce by 300% in former restricted zones. The Assembly's fall had triggered a renaissance across the galaxy. Species that had been deliberately kept isolated were sharing technologies and cultural knowledge. The Rathi Consortium's merchant fleets, now operating without artificial restrictions, were connecting worlds that had never known direct trade. There are still challenges, Ada continued. Some former Assembly worlds are struggling to adapt to the new economic reality, but the Coalition's mutual aid protocols are helping ease the transition. The real victory wasn't in defeating the Assembly. It was in building something better in its place. Earth had drawn on centuries of human experience with governance, combining the best elements of various systems while protecting against the concentration of power. The quantum architects report that the new decentralized control system is stable, Harrison announced. No single entity can manipulate the trade routes or communication networks without consensus from the Coalition Council. Lyra rose to address the chamber. When I proposed reforms to the Assembly's trade policies, I never imagined it would lead to this. Humanity didn't just free me from prison. They freed the entire galaxy from a system of control that had become a prison for everyone except those at the top. The quantum displays showed real-time data from across Coalition space. Trade ships moving freely through formerly restricted routes, scientific exchanges between previously isolated species, cultural festivals bringing together civilizations that had been kept apart by Assembly policies. The hardliners warned that removing their control would lead to chaos, Ada remarked. Instead, it's led to the greatest period of progress and cooperation in galactic history. The Assembly's greatest fear had been losing control. They never understood that true stability comes not from control, but from giving people the freedom to build connections and systems that benefit everyone. Earth Command has approved the final transfer of quantum defense technologies to Coalition control, Harrison reported. All member species now have equal access to the protective grid. The old Assembly chamber, with its artificial hierarchy and displays of power, had been redesigned. Now it was a true forum where representatives from every world could meet as equals. The crystalline towers no longer symbolized authority imposed from above, but rather the transparent structure of shared governance. There will always be those who try to gather power at others' expense, Ada addressed the Council. But we've proven that when diverse species work together, we can build systems strong enough to resist corruption and flexible enough to evolve. Looking out over the chamber, Ada saw not just the end of one story, but the beginning of many more. The galaxy was entering an age of unprecedented cooperation and discovery. Humanity had shown that sometimes the greatest revolution isn't in destroying old systems, but in showing people how to build better ones. The Coalition recognizes Earth's contribution to galactic peace and justice, Lyra announced formally. Commander Blackwood, your species has taught us all a valuable lesson. True power lies not in control and restriction, but in the connections we build and the freedom we share. As the council session ended, Ada watched representatives from dozens of species mingling freely, sharing ideas, and making plans. The Assembly had spent millennia building walls between worlds. Humanity had shown them how to build bridges instead. Ready to head home? Harrison asked. Ada smiled, watching the new galaxy they'd helped create come to life around them. Not just yet. I think we're only getting started. The stars shone brighter now, unrestricted by artificial barriers. The galaxy had changed, and while challenges remained, the future held more promise than ever before. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning a war, but in showing people a better way to live in peace.